The Cinema5D virtual show is brought to you by B&H, the professional source for all your video needs. And CVP, the leading specialist in creative cine, video, and photo solutions.
Hello guys, I'm sorry for this massive problem that we had with the live stream. Very sorry for that. Of course, this is the first time we do this on our own kind of here at the studio, so this is why we had some big problems here. But I think we've solved them. We would appreciate if you let us know if there still is a problem in the YouTube or Facebook live chat. But yeah, so we are about to enter the Canon press conference in 4 minutes. Just before that, I want to introduce our distinguished panel, which we will get back to right after the press conference. On the other side of the planet, I have my dear partner and colleague, Johnny Behiri. How are you?
Hi, guys.
In Tokyo?
I'm fine, thank you very much. It's only, what's the time now? Only 2 a.m.
Oh.
And the night is still young.
Night is still young. And we're only 57 minutes late with our live stream, so that's not too bad. Sorry about that. We also have Philip Bloom in London. How are you?
I'm fine, how are you? It's good to talk to you. I haven't talked to you for a while.
Yeah, well, we have had me several times overlapping in the last hour or so because of the feedback. And we also have Jake Radcliffe from CVP in the UK. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Hey, guys.
So we only have a very brief moment until the Canon press conference starts. So we might know what's coming, but what are you guys hoping for Canon to do? Let's put it that way, with the new announcements. Philip.
To do it better. Okay. I would say to do it better and cheaper.
Better and cheaper, okay.
I want them to bring out, well, mirrorless stills cameras that have great 4K without cropping. I don't know if it will be announced on this because it's NAB show. It's more likely video camera. I would love to see a new C100 because I think they have neglected the bottom end of their cinema camera line for, well, since the C100 Mark II. So I think there's a big gap that they've got there and they really need to fill it. The ones that E2 are coming into and stuff. So I think that's the thing they need to get.
Well, they haven't really introduced anything low end in a very long time. Even in the normal DSLR line, I think they're focusing a lot on the high end. So let's see what's coming there. Jake, what are you hoping for?
Yeah, I think like what Johnny says. Yeah, something better for cheaper is always what everyone wants. So yeah, I mean, obviously with the C500 just coming out, I'm interested to see whether it is going to be a C100 replacement, C200 or C300. But hopefully it's going to be within that little territory there. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange time to still introduce stuff, I guess, because with the global situation right now, the question is who is actually buying something. But I appreciate that Canon is still using, or we appreciate that Canon is still using the original slot that they had for the NAB press conference, because even this crisis will be over eventually and people will need the new equipment again to shoot new stuff. So I don't know what your opinion is on this.
I personally think it is a terrible time to bring out anything, to be honest with you. Everybody, nobody's really working apart from doing YouTube stuff or lives. And money, you've got to be very careful about what you're buying. So it's as long as it doesn't come out, and as long as whatever is announced isn't the most amazing thing ever and is available straight away, then it's fine. If they announce something and it's going to be ready and available in a few months, that's fine. It's just that I personally could not justify buying anything expensive right now. I can justify buying some small rig, and that's about it. The rest of it, it doesn't make any. It's right now is not the time for me to be buying new stuff. Sorry, Jake and CVP, everybody, but it is a worrying time because we don't know how long it is going to go on for, and if social distancing does continue after lockdown, that will affect shoots without question. It will affect shoots. So whether they resume they won't resume in the numbers that we've had before for a long time, I don't think.
Well, I guess we should switch to the Canon press conference now, which is supposed to start right now. So I'm asking my director to switch over, and we'll be back in this live panel after we've seen what they announced, and we'll look at what we might have known before. But let's see what Canon has for us. I think we're still waiting to cut over for the press conference. So that's the countdown actually there. You can see it's happened 1 day and 7 hours ago. This is a mistake that Canon made on their website, unfortunately, but they are aware of it. I mean, apparently there was a wrong setting there, but this is supposed to start any second now. We just keep our
maybe they have
eyes.
some sound
45
issues.
seconds, apparently.
We got 20 seconds on our video as well.
I'm watching your video right now, Jake. It says 34 seconds on YouTube, so that's however long that is. Maybe it's already been announced. The delay is so big.
Now, the funny thing is that, I mean, this countdown on the Canon website is taking your own computer clock. So that's why it says minus 1 days.
Okay.
So that must have been a programming issue. So, but they confirmed to us that it is being started. The press conference is at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, which is now. So this should start any second. But everybody should bear in mind that right now everybody is working from home, even in these big companies. So of course, everybody's struggling with the same issues that we have right now.
Hey, at least our sound is working.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay. I'm talking to my director. Please reload the page. They seem to be live.
Who's on the chat for your channel, Jake?
Me.
On YouTube? Have you just announced the camera?
Instead, I have the opportunity to welcome you into my home.
601, mate.
We're in my kitchen.
Oh, you announced
And to
it.
help
You
kick off
released it
Canon's
without it being
message to
actually
you and to the
on the
world.
presser. You cheeky monkey.
Mate, 8,750 quid. So cheap. So good.
Well, it's all right. Yeah, money bags like you, but you get like a 90% discount at CVP.
Oh, no. I don't get a discount.
Yeah, whatever. You don't get discount because you get it free as long as you work for them. Only as long as you work for them. The moment you leave is when you have to give it all back.
That's half my room currently. So.
Is there an announcement live yet?
Or more easily.
Well,
Part of my role
I see it's not
to meet
but
the needs of your
I never know anymore
audiences
if
and the
it's,
markets you serve.
No,
What is it?
Our
live
world
yesterday
and workflows have
and
been
7 hours.
evolving, and
It's like,
video has taken hold of so much of our daily lives, from cinema and television to YouTube and streaming, and now
I don't think we need to see the live announcement because CVP have already
Done it.
got a video up.
Have you,
yeah.
Did you see the R5
current
spec?
climate,
Well,
virtual meetings
No.
and conference calls.
So,
It's important
8K
for us
raw,
that
up
we
to
understand the
29.97
practical
internal.
and cultural
Don't-
changes in how our equipment's being
don't confuse
used.
the people now.
What?
Is it? R5 has got internal RAW.
Yep.
How much is that camera going to be?
Don't know. I don't know how they're gonna. I mean, the heat is the one thing I was like, what the fuck? How like? Are we still live?
Of course.
Oh, we are. Okay, yeah.
I-
Say it. Okay.
Well, I think it's probably going to come in. It's going to also have CF Express, but it's also going to probably come with a built-in Dyson fan.
It has CF
The big
Express,
ones.
Yeah, it's CF Express. It's going to do
Yeah.
8K. It's going to do 8K 4210-bit internal, no crop. Well, this is uncropped as well.
Is the 4K no crop?
Yeah, 4K is no crop, and the 119.88 is 4K uncropped, and that's 4210-bit again. Both everything's H2.65 apart from the raw, which obviously going to be some flavor of Canon raw light, whether it's raw light or full fat raw.
I
but it's the
love
interesting thing
our
is that it's
glass,
C-Log,
and
like
so
the
do
One
many.
DX Mark III,
It's in a
which
variety
kind of
that
means
suits
that
any
the
creative
sensor's
look.
going to be limited dynamic range wise.
Now,
Okay, guys,
with
we
the
are
new
on with
RF
Canon
lenses
finally, so
and
please
our system,
mute
we are breaking
all
new
your
boundaries in both.
microphones for now. Let's talk later.
and gear, and I feel so privileged to be part of that creative process. Like many of you, as we've been staying home and hunkering down, I've been in awe of some of the incredibly creative work streaming to my television, compelling stories and amazing scenes. I've also been glued to press conferences and daily updates captured by one-person crews in socially distant situations. And I've taken the time to pull out some old photos and videos of my own and reflect on cherished memories. And that fills me with joy and hope. So for today, please remain safe and enjoy hearing about some of the technology we plan to roll out later this year. And be sure to stick around until the end, because we may share a nugget or two of what's coming in the future as well. Thank you for joining us. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Paul Hawkshurst, a senior professional market specialist at Canon, who's going to walk you through our first product introduction.
Hi everyone, this is Paul with Canon USA, and I'm coming at you safely from home here in New York City. And I am so excited to be able to announce to you the Canon C300 Mark III. I am very happy about this. I've been waiting for Canon to release a camera like this for years. And so it's so happy to actually get to hold it in my hand and to see it. This camera is really the culmination, at least to me, it's the culmination of cinema EOS. And without much further ado, let's get right to the main specs. Starting off, we have a brand new 4K Super 35mm dual gain output sensor. For me, this is the big one because this sensor is capable of delivering over 16 stops of total dynamic range. Next on the list, it wouldn't be a Canon camera without a Digic processor. And this one uses the Digic DV7. This is also the same engine that drives the C500 Mark II and allows us to do the following: 4K in UHD, as well as 2K in HD, up to 120 frames with no crop. Additionally, if you choose to do the Super 16mm crop, you can do 2K up to 180 frames per second. The two recording formats in the camera are Cinema Raw Lite and XFAVC. Another feature that's going to make a lot of people happy: user interchangeable lens mounts, finally coming to the C300 line. Another new feature of the C300 is the ability to de-squeeze anamorphic lenses and to be able to monitor the corrected field of view. Well, it certainly wouldn't be a cinema EOS camera if we didn't talk about dual pixel autofocus, and this camera has it in spades. Another interesting feature that we're seeing gain a lot of ground because of its inclusion in the C500 Mark II, this camera has electronic image stabilization, which works in XFAVC. Something people have been asking for in the C300 for a long time. It's finally here. You can install your own LUTs. The C300 Mark III comes with a 12G SDI output, and this is going to be able to give you 4K through one cable. I've only just started to scratch the surface of the features of this camera, but for now, why don't we take a tour of the body? Now, I know what you're thinking. When you saw this the first time, you were probably like, Paul, what are you doing? That's a C500 Mark II. Well, actually, the camera is the exact same body as the C500 Mark II. That's right down to the 3.9 pounds weight and the balance of it. So this is a really interesting thing. That means that all of your C500 Mark II accessories are going to work on this camera. It kind of ushers in a new era of interchangeability on set. With the EU V1 or the EU V2, the camera becomes primed to become a full broadcast experience. With our combination of RS422, with the Genlock, and with the 12G output, you can hook it up to a multi-dyne silverback system, and you can take a fiber connection from that directly to any broadcast studio that you need to go. What can you shoot with this thing? All right, so first off, we've established that the camera can record Cinema Raw Lite to the CF Express cards. And again, this is in any crop mode. So Super 35 crop mode, you're going to be getting 4K Cinema Raw Lite up to 120 frames per second. If I go into the Super 16mm crop mode, then I can shoot 2K Cinema Raw Lite up to 180 frames a second. In 4K, the Cinema Raw Lite comes at a data usage of 1 gigabit per second. While in the 2K mode, you're looking at 250 megabits per second. So quite a savings in data. An important note about Cinema Raw Lite is that in frame rates leading up to 30 and including 30, you're going to be shooting 12-bit depth. But if you exceed 30, then it goes down to 10-bit. So something just to keep in mind when you're planning your projects. Let's take a look now at XFAVC. XFAVC is Canon's proprietary AVC codec. We first came out with in the original C300 Mark II, and then we used it in pretty much every Cinema EOS camera since then. So while you're in AVC, your available resolutions in the Super 35 mode are 4K DCI, UHD, 2K DCI, Full HD, and 720. When you go into the Super 16 crop mode, you're going to be getting 2K, Full HD, and also 720. One of the nice things about the XFAVC in this camera is that not only do you have the standard bit rates, but they've also included a long GOP mode, which greatly increases the amount of space that you can have on the card. And maybe of tantamount importance when talking about XFAVC with this camera is that all modes of XFAVC are recorded at 10-bit 422 color sampling. Probably the most important thing we need to talk about on this camera is the newly designed dual gain output sensor. Now, this is a 4K Super 35mm CMOS sensor that expands the dynamic range to over 16 stops. How does it do that? Well, to really get down to it, we need to go deep. We need to go down to the sensor level. So if you ever sat through a Cinema EOS presentation, there's a very good chance you've seen this slide. Basically, what it's showing is that each pixel in the sensor is split into two different diodes. Those diodes are always taking 2 frames of the exact same image. Now, for dual pixel autofocus, it's using those 2 frames for phase detection. However, the Canon engineers realized that they can use those 2 different frames and value them at different gains in order to expand the dynamic range. And so what's happening here is that off of diode A, you have one image that is of low gain and hence low noise. Off of diode B, you're getting a frame that is of higher gain, but it satisfies the pixel's need for saturation. So these 2 separate frames that are of the same image, of the exact same point in time, but at 2 separate gains, are combined and then dumped out of the sensor. Because these 2 frames are of the exact same point in time and of the exact same image, there's absolutely 0 temporal artifacting happening with this. What the dual gain output sensor gives us then is a lower noise floor, and hence a much wider usable latitude. And this is especially true in the shadow region. Now, this expansion of the dynamic range is available in all shooting modes: RAW, XFAVC, 4K and 2K, and Super 35mm and Super 16mm. When you're in the Super 35mm mode, you can get this up to 60 frames per second. When you exceed 60 frames per second, the camera reverts to the typical dynamic range that you're used to of the C300 Mark II or any of the earlier Cinema EOS cameras. In the Super 16 mode, you can go up to 120 frames, but beyond that, the dynamic range goes back down to 15 stops. The reliability and performance and quality that Canon's been cultivating for the last 8 years of Cinema EOS has reached its apotheosis of the C300 Mark III. And that's really thanks to all of you, all the feedback we've received from rental houses, from DPs, from broadcasters, from owner-operators, everybody who's managed to work with the Canon brand and send us feedback. Thank you. One more thing before we go. The C300 Mark III will be available later this year in 2020 and priced at $10,999 US.
Thanks, Paul. Up next from the City of Brotherly Love, we have Ryan Snyder, Professional Market Specialist for Canon's Imaging Solutions Group, who will introduce an exciting new cinema lens.
Hi, I'm Ryan Snyder, and I'm very excited to share with you today that we are introducing a new Cine Servo lens. This is the CN 10x25 IAS, also known as the Cine Servo 25-250. If you're familiar with our Cine Servo lenses, you probably already know about the impressive range we offer, from our versatile wide-angle 17-120 to the unique ultra-telephoto 50-1000. This new model strengthens our lineup as it finds its place in between these 2 popular lenses. With a powerful 10x optical zoom range and Super 35 sensor coverage, this lens is sure to become a mainstay of broadcast and cinema productions. With its medium telephoto range and servo operation, it will appeal to live event, sports, nature, documentary, and news applications. At the same time, it lends itself perfectly to commercial and cinema productions with its uncompromising 4K image quality. Like all our cinema lenses, it offers minimal breathing, warm color for pleasing skin tones, and durable, weather-resistant construction. Let's look at some specs. From 25mm at the wide angle to 250mm on the tele side, this lens is incredibly versatile. It has a built-in 1.5x extender, which increases the telephoto end to an impressive 375mm with only one-stop light loss. As an added benefit, using the extender allows for full-frame sensor coverage. More on that in a minute. It features a fast t2.95 aperture, which only ramps to t3.95 past 187mm. That gives you almost a 7:1 zoom range flat, with no ramping at wide open. There's an 11-blade iris that delivers a beautiful, smooth bokeh for cinematic out-of-focus backgrounds. It has a 4-foot close focus distance for working in tight spaces. The lens features a removable servo motor drive unit that offers the same feel and usability as a conventional ENG lens. It allows smooth, adjustable, low and high speed zooming, as well as 3 20-pin Hirose digital inputs for controlling focus and zoom and iris, and a 16-bit absolute value encoder for working with virtual systems. This lens features 180-degree focus rotation for precise but quick handheld operability. The grip is ergonomically designed for optimum balance to reduce fatigue on long handheld shoots. The focus, zoom, and iris rings are geared for compatibility with a fizz unit for either remote or crew-based operation. The gear pitches are 0.8 and 0.5 for focus, 0.5 for zoom, and 0.4 for iris. The 25 to 250 is available in either EF or PL mounts. The EF version is compatible with all of our Cinema EOS features, such as dual pixel autofocus and focus guide, which provides visual confirmation when manually focusing. The PL mount version supports the widely adopted Cook Eye technology for metadata pass-through. The mount can be swapped at a Canon factory service center. Most impressive, however, is that with all these features and this incredible zoom range, the lens weighs in at only 6.7 pounds and measures just over 11 inches. Compare that to our 17 to 120, which weighs 6.3 pounds and measures 10.3 inches. This 25 to 250 is a great companion lens to it, with plenty of crossover range. Remember I mentioned that when using the 1.5x extender, the lens can cover full frame? As we see more full-frame cinema cameras appear in the market, like our C500 Mark II and C700 full-frame, cinema zoom lens options are somewhat limited for the time being. On full frame, this lens is a 37.5 to 375 millimeter with an impressive aperture range of t4.4 to 5.9, all on a very compact and lightweight lens. With the flick of a switch, it really is two lenses in one. In a short amount of time, our 17 to 120 has become a standard in the industry because it offers an incredible cinematic image with familiar broadcast feel and operation. Users I have spoken to only wished for one thing: more range. I have no doubt the Cine Servo 25 to 250, with its increased telephoto range, lightweight design, and proven Canon image quality, will be just as popular. This lens will be available later this year for the price of $29,999. For more information after this virtual press conference, visit the Canon USA website and follow us on social media. Thanks for your attention. I'll be back shortly to tell you about some more exciting announcements.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next segment, where we'll hear about new technologies in the world of broadcast television. Our next presenter is Jaman Lomax, Canon's National Sales Manager, TV Broadcast and Production.
Hi, I'm Jaman Lomax, National Broadcast Sales Manager for the US and Latin America at Canon USA. I'm here today to tell you about the latest introduction to our award-winning lineup of 4K UHD broadcast lenses. For over 60 years, Canon has been a trusted name in broadcast optics. As productions have advanced from standard definition to HD and now to 4K UHD, Canon lenses have been there every step of the way. Our gear can be found on the field, in the studio, and on the streets, delivering captivating imagery for some of the most watched moments in our history. Throughout our decades in the industry, we have worked hand in hand with leading broadcasters and broadcast camera manufacturers to develop new products and technologies that advance the art form of imaging. When 2020 began, Canon had the largest lineup of 2/3" 4K lenses in the world, with 17 different options to choose from. Now we're adding an 18th lens to the team. Back in 2018, we introduced the CJ18 by 7.6 as a versatile mid-range option in our UHD GC line of cost-effective 4K UHD portable lenses. Now, we're proud to introduce its younger sibling, the CJ18 by 7.6 KASE. It features all of the imaging excellence of the original, but with the 2-time extender removed. By eliminating the extender, we're able to maintain a compact and lightweight design in order to meet the versatile and ever-changing needs of a broad range of video productions. At only 3.7 pounds, it's an ideal choice for documentaries, sports, house of worship, and news coverage, as well as an attractive option for POV placements, Steadicam, and robotic applications. The new KASE lens delivers 4K UHD quality at a price point that matches well with many lower-cost 4K cameras in the market today. This lens achieves high-level 4K UHD performance across the entire zoom range of 7.6 to 137 millimeter, all thanks to Canon's proprietary optical design technology. In addition, the lens supports the BT 2020 wide color gamut, which is essential to HDR imaging. The ergonomics and digital servo controls of the lens are similar to Canon's current lineup of portable zoom lenses, providing users with maximum mobility in a variety of shooting situations. When combined with the rest of our UHD GC and UHD XS lenses, we now have an astounding lineup of 18 4K UHD broadcast lenses, all capable of satisfying your creative needs regardless of application. 5 super telephoto box lenses covering a broad spectrum of zoom ranges for capturing sports, concerts, and live events, while the UHD Digi Super 27 offers a powerful in-studio solution. On the portable lens side, we now offer 12 ENG EFP solutions for originating 4K UHD imagery. When you combine and our award-winning customer service and support, it's no wonder why we've been the brand in the world. And now, to tell you a bit more about our latest broadcast offerings, my colleague and friend, Larry Thorpe.
TV and 4K UHD lenses, and our Cine Servo Super 35mm lenses. We will now look more closely at the focus demand. Here we show the physical challenge that confronts the camera operator, namely the heightened sensitivity of that physical UHD lenses, and our Cine Servo Super 35mm lenses. We will now look more closely at the focus demand. Here we show the physical challenge that confronts the camera operator, namely the heightened sensitivity of that physical control knob as the resolution of the lens camera system increases. In 4K UHD, only a small movement of that knob makes the total available. Fine Focus Mode 1 is tailored to the quite special shooting environments of broadcast television coverage of live stage shows, a major element within outside broadcasts around the world. Typically, the lens is at the back of the opera house, theater, or auditorium, and the camera operator finds the central focus point for the on-stage talent. During rehearsal, the range of required focus changes is established, and now the focus demand is preset to provide that restricted optical focus range, but with a wide knob rotation range. This facilitates very precise focusing on the chosen subject. Here you see the diagrammatic representation of Fine Focus Mode 1 setting, and on the right is shown the representation as it appears in the focus demand display. This picture illustrates a live opera scene being televised with the camera operator using the Fine Focus Mode 1 to achieve a beautifully smooth and high precision focus on a facial close-up, very common in operatic broadcasts. In live television coverage of theatrical stage dramas, the need for facial close-ups is also common. Finally, this Fine Focus mode allows very smooth and precise live rack focusing between different talent on a stage. Our second operational mode that can be preset is Focus Range Limit. Here, the desire is to be able to refocus subjects whose movements are limited. Here, the camera operator prefers to achieve these adjustments with a limited amount of focus knob rotation. Showing the diagrammatic representation of limitations to both the focus range and the knob control range around the chosen central focus. Illustrating limited knob rotation to refocus on different subjects. The third mode is termed Control Range Limit, and it's the virtual opposite of the Fine Focus Mode 1. Here, the camera operator seeks a wide range of optical focus control, but implemented with a small range of focus knob control. The diagram illustrates this, and the associated display portrayal is shown. In a normal action of the focus knob, showing the achievement of a substantial readjustment of focus, but achieved with a curtailed range of focus knob rotation. Now we turn to the new zoom controller. Like the focus demand, this zoom demand has buttons and switches that allow a wide variety of operational controls to be preset. This new zoom demand retains all the traditional programmable functions that have been in zoom controllers for many years, but it has some interesting additions. The built-in display greatly facilitates the many presetting options. The display supports easy selection of the desired zoom control curve. It also facilitates the reversal of the thumb control rocker to cater to the preference of different camera operators.
Up next, we have Nate McFarlane, a senior specialist in our Quality Assurance and Control Division, who will walk us through the latest developments for Canon's line of 4K reference displays.
Hi, my name is Nate McFarlane, Senior Quality Engineer for Canon USA. Today, I'm pleased to announce exciting new feature and firmware upgrades coming to our DPV lineup of professional HDR reference displays. Our frequent product updates strive to continually push the boundaries of our displays, ensuring that our users can confidently tackle any challenge of SDR or HDR video production. This iteration that's set to release later this year is no different. Let's review some of the highlight changes coming with these exciting new updates. Let's start right away with some breakthrough image quality improvements. When shooting HDR content, preserving details in both the deepest shadows and the brightest highlights is of utmost importance. Keeping this in mind, I'm pleased to announce today that due to improvements in both our image processing and local dimming algorithms, our 2411, 1710, and 1711 displays will now all feature an improved full screen black level of 0.001 nits, which is a major upgrade from the previous 0.005 nit specification. The best part is this enhancement is completely free and will be included along with our firmware package coming later this year. For our broadcast and live production users, we're offering an additional paid license upgrade for both our 1710 and 1711 displays. This upgrade will raise the overall full screen peak luminance from 600 to 1000 nits. And we're also increasing the full screen peak luminance that's supported by our local dimming algorithm from 300 to 600 nits. These peak luminance and local dimming enhancements, along with the free black level upgrade, completely overhaul the image quality performance from our 17-inch displays, which will now boast an impressive 1,000,000:1 full screen contrast ratio. Now let's switch gears to some upcoming free firmware changes. Lookup tables, or LUTs, play a huge role in conforming color appearance both on set and during post. The ability to quickly and reliably load LUTs into your display device is critical. In our upcoming update, users can now import 1D and 3D .cube LUT files directly into any of our displays via USB, without the use of any converter software or additional tooling. One of the most popular features included in our award-winning HDR toolkit is our Pixel Value Checker, a function which displays the current luminance and RGB code value of any given pixel. In our upcoming firmware update, we've also added a chromaticity diagram on-off toggle. This will also show the plotted XY coordinate of the same pixel directly on the display, allowing for quick color gamut references and QC confirmations. To further boost our display's seamless integration with industry cinema cameras, we're updating our existing EOS Cinema Link function. All of our displays will now make automatic color range changes based on Canon cinema camera metadata. Furthermore, we're including new built-in LUTs that will convert video signals taken from red digital cinema cameras to traditional SDR and HDR color gamuts. Along with these changes, we've also made feature improvements and quality of life updates to our existing web control, range check, area marker, and waveform functions. In addition, we've added a brand new error log export feature, which will allow for easy signal and power troubleshooting during production. We've really only scratched the surface of what's coming with these upgrades and are excited to share more information. Check back to this page later today or the Canon USA website in the coming months to learn more about these updates and their availability.
Once again, we welcome back Ryan Snyder, who will now introduce the latest firmware developments for Canon's professional video and cinema EOS cameras.
Hi, Ryan Snyder here again, and now on to what you've been waiting for, camera firmware updates. These pro video and cinema updates add features to extend the functionality of the cameras and are based on feedback from the field. Let's begin with the XF705. Currently, if you want to record in 4K resolution, you must use the H.265 XFHEVC codec. While that codec is extremely efficient, providing 10-bit 422 4K and manageable file sizes, it does require some major horsepower in an editing system for smooth playback. That's why we're adding 4K UHD XFAVC and HD MP4 recording modes. You will now be able to record 4K 8-bit 420 video up to 30p in our tried and true H.264 XFAVC format. Additionally, you can record full HD or 720 in good old MP4 up to 60p. The XF705 will also be getting support for our browser remote feature over Ethernet. In addition to the existing Wi-Fi support, this will allow you to control camera settings, zoom, and focus from any web browser through a reliable hardwired connection. Along with the XF705, we're adding the capability for the C500 Mark II and C200 and 200B to pull down a 60p or 60i signal to 24 or 30p over the SDI and HDMI outputs. This allows the look of the video to be changed without affecting the output signal. This will appeal to live productions, particularly house of worship, that wish to change the frame rate aesthetic during an event seamlessly with the touch of a button. The C200 and 200B will now have the ability to use the HDMI and SDI outputs simultaneously, which will make a lot of people happy as it expands options for monitoring and transmitting the image. The C500 Mark II gets a host of new additions. We'll now be able to record proxy files while shooting in XFAVC mode and have the choice of applying a Rec. 709 LUT. This will provide an offline editing solution for XFAVC in addition to Cinema Raw Lite. There's a new menu option, which allows the file names to be identical when recording in double slot mode. The real number and random ID assigned to the file will now match exactly between the two cards, making life easier for production shooting double slot for backup purposes. XFAVC long GOP support will be added, allowing for smaller file sizes in both 4K and HD. Interlaced HD and 720 options will be included as well. Finally, the following cameras will be adding support for our new Cine Servo 25-250 lens: the C200 and 200B, C300 Mark II, C500 Mark II, and all C700 models. Chromatic aberration and peripheral illumination correction, as well as dual pixel CMOS autofocus, will be supported. So there you have it. A lot of firmware updates coming to enhance these already great cameras. Look for these updates later this year. Thanks so much for your attention, and I wish you well. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you back in the field soon.
Now it's my privilege to welcome Larry Thorpe, Senior Fellow of Canon's Imaging Technologies and Communications Group, who will give an overview of Canon's new volumetric data technology. And a little later in the segment, he'll be joined by Mike Davis, Senior Vice President of Field and Technical Operations for Fox Sports and Chairman of the Sports Video Group.
Hello, everybody. Larry Thorpe joining you again and switching gears to speak about an emerging area that may be new to many of you, volumetric video, where we will share with you Canon's progress in this exciting field. In simple terms, volumetric video is the process of capturing moving images of the real world, encompassing people and objects, that can be used as information to create free viewpoint video, a naturally moving dynamic 3D model reproduction from any angle and at any moment in time. They are a form of avatars, but reproduced with very high visual fidelity. These models can be observed from arbitrary viewpoints in a virtual or augmented reality scene. Let's start by taking a look at the principles of volumetric video capturing in the context of sports. First, a large number of cameras are placed around the stadium or arena and synchronized video capture is performed. Next, silhouettes of objects, such as players or balls, are extracted from the images captured by each camera. The same is done for the background, minus the silhouettes that have been extracted. Now that we have the extracted object outlines from all the cameras, this data is used to reconstruct three-dimensional information of the objects. Finally, a path for a virtual camera from a vantage point decided by the producer is created, and the object is overlapped on the background according to the position and orientation of the virtual camera. We have now created a free viewpoint video. At a series of international rugby matches held in Japan last year, Canon successfully captured entire matches as 3D data and generated multiple streams of free viewpoint video within an hour of capture. As an achievement of the rugby matches, we're now able to generate free viewpoint content 3 seconds after capture, which allows us to generate a camera path and check the final image on site and deliver content in a short period of time. Anticipating multiple applications outside of sports coverage, but applying the technologies we have developed in sports video creation, Canon plans to launch a volumetric video creation service in a studio environment. By applying processing specific to the studio space, image quality will be improved beyond what was achieved in stadium capture. A volumetric video studio is being prepared in Kawasaki, less than half an hour outside of Tokyo, and will be opening hopefully in mid-May. Following are features with the planned volumetric video studio. A wide area capable of the simultaneous capture of a 10-person performance. Quick one-stop delivery service within a week from capture to video creation. Deliver not only 2D video content, but also 3D data to be used for AR, holograms, etc. improved image quality through the use of smaller voxel sizes and studio-specific processing. Let's take a look at the main specifications of the Kawasaki Studio. The darker green capture area itself is 26 feet by 26 feet and 11 feet high. The green dotted line shows the studio footprint, which is 66 feet by 46 feet and 13.8 feet high. There's a video editing suite adjacent to the studio where you can view the captured images as volumetric video. You can also explore the camera path while manipulating the virtual camera. Please take a look at some sample volumetric video clips that were created in our studio. Here you can see 8 dancers being captured simultaneously. The Kawasaki Studio will have the capability of capturing a 10-person performance. A 3D model of the entire space was created, which allows for viewpoint paths through the dancers or from above that would be difficult to accomplish with physical cameras. We will deliver high-quality content such as shown here as a one-stop service from capture to video creation. Details and facial expressions can be produced since in comparison to stadium capture, the number of cameras per capture area is higher in the studio. And in the studio currently being built, the number of cameras would be increased in comparison to when we shot these clips. This will, of course, improve the quality of production even further.
And now we're going to chat with Mike Davis of Fox Sports, who has seen the free viewpoint system in action, and he will tell us a little bit about it. You had occasion to go to Japan not so long ago to a major rugby event that was being covered by our free viewpoint system. Could you tell us what you saw there and what you thought of it?
I was lucky enough to go to Yokohama and meet with the Canon Inc. team. Very interested in seeing the free viewpoint system. Up to that point, we'd seen a lot of demonstrations, and I was extremely inspired by what I saw. Certainly a large array, a large setup, but the result ended up being what I thought was kind of the promise of volumetric capture. We've been thinking about volumetric capture for a while, but what I saw was volumetric capture in action. And by that, I mean a camera that can basically be placed anywhere on the field of play to get any angle at any time. And what was amazing about it was that it was done in near real time.
And why do you think, you say you've been looking at volumetric capture, why do you think volumetric capture is important to the sports industry?
Larry, I think that volumetric capture is the holy grail of sports coverage. It allows a completely new point of view for the fan. For time immemorial, we have been shooting sports from the outside in. We've got plenty of cameras that shoot, many with very nice Canon lenses on them, that shoot the action from the stands, from the camera positions. Volumetric capture was always interesting to us, even in its theoretical phase, of being a way to shoot a sport, to shoot an event from the inside out, to get the kinds of viewpoints that, quite frankly, our newer audiences, our younger demographics are used to seeing through video games and the types of interactions they have every day. So we thought that volumetric capture in general was a way to achieve a digital rendering of the entire production so that you could go back and look at any number of angles in any possible angle that you might be able to come up with, and to do it with a free range of motion while the action was actually going on was an absolute eye opener for us.
The fact that the recreation are essentially avatars of the actual players, does that affect the reality of it from the viewer's point of view? Or is the assumption that they may not know?
I would actually debate the point that they were avatars. I would say that by using the array of free viewpoint cameras and the processing in the background, basically creates a three-dimensional picture of the athletes, not unlike you see on TV. So whereas previous technology has actually used avatars to, I would say, simulate the action. I think that actually gathering the information in digital, in real space, and turning it into a digital 3D model essentially goes way beyond using avatars. I mean, these are recreations that show the movements of heads and extremities, that show the ball. I mean, it is the event.
And do you see it being favorable to one particular sport over another, or do you think in the longer term it has applications for virtually all sporting events?
I think volumetric capture probably has applications for every sporting event out there. The weight on volumetric capture is simply the size of the arena that you're attempting to capture. So, you know, the larger the arena, the larger the array of equipment. So that could be problematic, or at least something to overcome. However, I think that in time, every event, whether you're talking about basketball, fighting, certainly football, and as we've seen, rugby and American football, of course, as well, could definitely benefit from volumetric capture. I think it's just a matter of the installation and the hamsters and wheels that make it go.
And apart from outside broadcasts of sporting events and other things, do you see applications for volumetric capture in the studio, in entertainment, in other television genres?
I think that capturing anything in the entertainment world would also be very useful. If you think about concerts and performances and even scripted programming could be used and portrayed in volumetric, whether you're doing it as your final product or you're using volumetric capture as a tool to augment other things like we're thinking about in sports. So I think that volumetric absolutely has a life and a complete potential for everything else. The other thing, Larry, I would say is that for studio dailies and different things where, you know, you might be able to pre-visualize movie scenes and other things potentially done in CG could be a very interesting use of the technology. You see, it seems to me, once you get whatever you're capturing in that 3D environment, you can essentially do what you want with it. Yeah. You can replace things, you can add things, you can augment things. And I think that overall, what volumetric does and what the free viewpoint system promises is an incredible amount of control over whatever you end up capturing.
And speaking of control, what did you think of where we had brought the operational side of it, the folks at the control panel playing with that virtual camera? Is that at a level where it's workable for operators around the world?
Well, I think that what I saw in Japan were controls that were very similar to those that are used by Skycam or SpiderCam, where the operators were allowed to fly around in free space using joysticks, and then they combine that with a methodology of keyframes to come up with the replay. So I thought that it worked both in the live space. In other words, a trained operator could actually follow the action live, and in the post space of creating different looks and events and walkthroughs of various areas of interest that can work as well. So I think we saw both sides in Japan.
Well, frankly, I think that does it. That wraps up. I think you've given us a great overview of what you saw and what you think of the capability of free viewpoint. And we thank you very sincerely for that.
Well, it's been great for me to see the progression, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Canon does next with it.
Very good. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thanks, Larry.
Take care.
And now for a real treat, please welcome Drew McCallum, Technical Advisor in Canon's Consumer Experience Marketing Team, to share with us a little bit of what's to come from Canon in the near future.
Hello and welcome to Canon USA's virtual press conference. I'm Drew McCallum, technical advisor for Canon USA, and as you can see, I'm filming this from my home office here in New York, and I'm happy to have the privilege to tell you about some exciting new information about the upcoming Canon EOS R5 mirrorless camera. But first, a little flashback. 2008 was an interesting year for the Canon EOS system. Building on a very popular platform, the EOS 5D, the second generation camera, the EOS 5D Mark II, revolutionized the moving picture industry, allowing for filmmakers to capture movie footage with a relatively small camera body with a 24 by 36 millimeter size sensor, a format that was larger than the existing Super 35 millimeter format that they were used to. This full-frame camera set forth a new trend in motion picture capture, allowing for very low light performance, shallow depth of field, and use of lenses not generally accessible to everyday filmmaker. This small little camera, priced below $4,000, would set a new direction for Canon, setting the DSLR movie-making world on fire and bringing high-quality filmmaking not to just major motion picture budgets, but to the indie filmmaker, documentaries, as well as web-based content and journalism. Now, flash forward to 2011, introduction of Cinema EOS with a Canon C300, a dedicated motion picture camera for the movie professionals. But it was not just a new camera. This was a whole new line of cameras and lenses that would take the industry by storm. There are now dedicated cinema lenses that range from fast primes to super cine zoom lenses such as the instantly legendary 50-1000 that would break technological boundaries. And Canon recently put out a premium set of lenses released last year called Canon Sumire Primes that bring a different character to the look of the film. Now, just a couple of years ago, September of 2018 to be exact, I was thrilled to be able to help launch the totally new EOS R system, our full-frame mirrorless system of cameras and lenses that's here to set the future for Canon. With the EOS R and RP and a total of 9 RF lenses and several adapters now on the market, and quite a few more to come out even this year, the EOS R system is growing quickly. I'm not just reminiscing here. I bring this all up for a specific reason. That is, Canon's direction for a seamless movie creating experience. The DSLR technology grew, and I'll admit, maybe not as fast as some would have liked, but looking back, you can see what Canon had in mind. The engineers developed new sensor technology that would literally change the focus of filmmaking, no pun intended. Canon's dual pixel CMOS autofocus would allow for fast and accurate autofocus on the go, allow for very smooth focus transitions from subject to subject, and would eventually see additions and enhancements such as face, eye, and head detection. Now, what does all that have to do with today? I'm happy to bring a few more nuggets of information to you on our previously announced development of the upcoming EOS R5. Well, I assure you, this additional information is not all of what's coming in the next EOS R. These are some relevant features that will again enhance the seamless integration of stills and video. Back in February, we stated that Canon Inc. was developing the next full-frame mirrorless R system camera, the EOS R5, and would feature a newly designed CMOS sensor, would capture 8K video, and would be the first camera with IBIS, in-body image stabilization, to name a few of the video-centric features. Additionally, we would like to add that the 8K video capture will be able to record up to 30p, 2997 to be exact, with 422 10-bit Canon log or 422 10-bit HDRPQ, all with full width of the full-frame sensor, and includes Canon's remarkable dual-pixel CMOS AF in all 8K modes, and will be able to record internally. One other important note is that you'll be able to record 8K RAW video internally at up to 30p, again, full width of the sensor, and also supporting autofocus with dual-pixel CMOS AF. Now, we know that 8K is a bit of a hard file to digest, but the capabilities of 8K are already being realized in broadcasting content creation across the world. For those of you who may not be ready for 8K, the EOS R5 will also be able to capture 4K at up to 120p, and also 422 10-bit with Canon log, and also with the full width of the sensor. And again, all 4K modes will support dual-pixel CMOS AF, and yes, even the 4K 120p. All of this will be able to record to the dual card slots using either the CF Express for those data-heavy formats Or if you don't need such a file, you can record to the UHS-2 SD card. To enhance the stability of the footage, Canon is introducing sensor-based IBIS, in-body image stabilization, that when combined with Canon lenses will offer optical and in-body stabilization combined together. Autofocus has also greatly been enhanced, and you can see some of the technology in recently announced and now shipping EOS 1DX Mark III. With new technology, we're able to track your subject's head, face, and eyes, and for you nature and wildlife filmmakers, a new animal detection autofocus technology has been implemented, tracking the animal's face, eye, and body of animals such as dogs, cats, and birds. Now that's it for me for now. I assure you we've not revealed all the advancements of the EOS R5 camera yet. There are a lot more to come. We are working on that, plus a few more lenses for this year, so keep watching usa.canon.com for more information about the upcoming EOS R5 and more products coming soon.
Thank you all for spending some time with us today. We hope you found this information about what's to come useful and exciting. Please revisit this webpage, www.usa.canon.com/VPC2020 in the coming days for this video, as well as additional resources and materials about our new announcements and introductions. Thank you again for joining us, and stay well.
Guys, okay, everybody can hear me now. We actually didn't know when that this is over, so I'm asking my panel on the other side of the line to please unmute their conference, because I think some of you guys heard somebody typing. So obviously, this is the first time we're doing this, so we're not the best live streamers. Jake, Philip, and Gunther, can you hear me?
Yep. Can hear you very well.
All right, I can hear you too. Now Johnny left the room. I think we told him that people can hear him type now. He's gone out crying, but he'll be back any second, I hope. All right, so we had the new Canon announcements. Yeah, what does everybody think? I mean, I just added Gunther to the conversation. Gunther is our lab test guy. He's our doctor in the team, and he's the engineer in the team who's the expert for all the technical details about the cameras. And because we had the Canon C300 Mark III already for the last couple of days, yeah, that's the camera, Gunther was already able to do a short lab test with it, meaning testing the dynamic range of the camera and also the rolling shutter. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before that, I want to hear everybody's thoughts on the new announcements. What do you think, Philip?
I think I'm the only one who didn't know much about it, or anything about it. It's okay. So you've got the advantages. You've used it, so it sounds good. I mean, it's Super 35. It's kind of like I've kind of moved mostly past that now. So it's hard to get excited about Super 35 when I'm using full frame video cameras with the FX9, and you have C500 Mark II, which I haven't used yet, but that looks great. So I don't know. Should I be more excited? Possibly. The fact that it has 120 frames, 4K looks cool. The dynamic range looks good. But I don't know. I'm more excited by what the R5's giving us. That's more exciting. Not being. It's. I guess. If it's super. I just feel like the Super 30, the 120 frames 4K, that should be in the C500 Mark II, really. And the other thing that disappoints me from it is it's not RF mount. You have this fantastic new lineup of lenses, which neither of their new cinema cameras can use, which is insanity to me.
Yeah, this is a bit strange in my opinion as well. because, as you said, I mean, they have an user interchangeable mount now. I mean, this is the EF mount version, which is probably going to be the most popular one, of course. And there's also there's not separate versions anymore. That's what I wanted to say. Like there was on older Canon models. Now you can, just buy a PL mount. And I asked them why it's not possible to install an RF mount when they presented the camera to us, and they told me it's because of the flange distance. I understand that, but I just, when you have an interchangeable mount, you surely could design it in a way that you could also have a shorter flange distance. And as you said, if you had an RF mount on the camera, that would mean you could practically adapt any other mount on there, even EF and PL.
That excuse about the flange makes no sense to me. It's like them saying, "Oh, we didn't know there was an RF mount coming. We didn't know about these RF lenses." These lenses have come out, have been in the works for ages. I don't know, it just feels crazy to have this fantastic new lens system, and a 2020 camera now won't be able to use them. C500 Mark II is bad enough you can't use them. I have a huge amount of EF lenses. That's great, but it just feels that one of the biggest innovations that Canon are doing at the moment is with their lenses. It's really good, and it seems such a shame not to be able to take advantage of them. It seems like a really wasted opportunity, which Red are going to take up with if it ever comes out, the Komodo.
Well, what still amazes me about the camera, despite the fact it's not a full frame camera like the C500 Mark II and the FX9, of course, that you have internal cinema raw light recording, and that even up to 120 frames per second in 4K. Now, I did have a chance to shoot with it a little bit over the weekend. So we had a beautiful sunny day on Saturday. So my girlfriend Anita and I, we went out and tried to catch, some action. It's not easy to catch some fast action during times like these when everybody's basically supposed to be sitting at home. But that's what we did. And before we continue to talk, I think I'm also asking Jake for his opinion on this. I mean, did you actually, or did CVP, you guys usually have early hands-on with cameras as well, right?
Yeah, so we had the Mark III for, I think it was around 4 or 5 days. And I sent it, so I live up in West London, and Joe, who I do the videos with, lives down in Horsham. So Joe lives in a more scenic area. He's a bit nicer, so I said to him, I was like, we'll send the camera down to you, and he got to shoot some test footage then. So we shot some ISO tests, shot a lot of creative B-roll. He went on a couple of walks with his girlfriend Kathleen, the one in the video, and shot in some varied lighting conditions to kind of show, one of the biggest things about this camera, obviously, being the dual gain output sensor, obviously being dynamic range. So that's what wanted to show a lot in the video, which is what we did. And I think it does have a place in the market. I think a lot of people working in the industry will still want a Super 35 camera that arguably has a great sensor. I mean, we need to test it more, obviously, but yeah, I think there's still a position for it in the market, even though it's not full frame. And from what we've seen, it does look really good for the price point they've aimed it at. And the C500, it's kind of like Philip said, it's kind of cannibalized it a little bit with the higher frame rate 4K stuff, and they really should have put it in the 500. But obviously, the lower light performance and the fact you can achieve those wider field of views with the 500 will still, that's still the reason to upgrade to the 500 over the 300.
But why not have a Super 35mm crop mode that can do the 120 frames?
Yes, it's obviously, it just depends on the limitations of the sensor, whether or not the Canon can do it, or it could be them just segmenting the market out, and that's unfortunately just part of the industry. But it's going to be one of
Canon
those
cripple hammer.
I mean, it's one of those things, we've been asking Canon for such a long time to give us full sensor readout high speed, and now we finally have it, and now we want more, which is of course also, to have 180 frames per second on the full sensor, even if it's just HD, which also surprises me that you actually have to use a Super 16 crop mode to achieve that. But still, it is something that, not the FX9 cannot do, 120 frames per second in 4K, and that even in RAW internally is quite amazing. And I think that will be something that a lot of people will really appreciate. So I think we should, actually, Johnny, what are your thoughts?
Without talking too much about the actual camera, this is turning to be the most amazing year for Canon. And I think we all, as filmmakers, we know how it felt when Canon kind of abandoned the community, and now they're coming back. And the 1DX Mark III is absolutely an amazing DSLR. The R5 looks as if it's going to be an amazing mirrorless camera. And the C300 Mark III looks also as a absolutely very nice working tool. So in all those segments, it doesn't matter where you look, it's almost like Canon is really bursting with almost like, they've been really, really hungry to show that they can do this. And obviously their engineers are capable of doing internal raw recording and so on. One of the things with the 1DX Mark III, when I was testing it, I was really surprised to see no fan, no heating. It's like amazing, while others are struggling. Yeah. So I really wonder how it's going to be with the R5, for example, to see if that camera also will record internally 8K and will it warm or not, get warm or not. Let's see. Very interesting year for Canon.
Do you think, Johnny, is it, Canon has kind of neglected the community on the lower end for a while, and now they're coming back in a way. Do you think it's too late to regain those users that have switched to Sony or Fujifilm?
This is the $1 million dollar question. And I tell you something, one of my dreams is to make an interview with the highest manager possible at Canon, the one who gave the order to leave the DSLR market, in a way, desert it and actually concentrate on the C line. Because strategically, that was a mistake. Obviously, people didn't wait. They moved on to other cameras. And by the way, if we look at that in a very sober eyes, Sony is on the verge of doing the same thing with the A7S cameras, let's say, with this specific line. People are not waiting. The industry is moving on. It's suffering. It's hurting. The mobile phones are cannibalizing on left and right, but that's a different subject. I'm just saying the industry is moving on, and people are showing kind of very little loyalty. And I'm happy to see that Canon is back. They're back big time. And my personal interest, because I guess I'm a bit older than everybody in the screen here, the days of running with big cameras, heavy cameras, for me are gone. I want something small. I want something to fit my personal dimension. I want to be seamless. I don't need customs to ask me about what I'm doing here. I don't want to fill up carnet when I'm traveling around the world. I want a capable tool that can work for me and not to carry it all the time. So the C300 Mark III, of course, looks like a very interesting camera for some. Me personally, I'm more interested on the smaller tools. And it's also fun, to speed blood in order to, because it's very easy when you have a capable camera. And if you have the eye, you can deliver. But if you have a bit of inferior tool to work with, I think it's a bit more challenging, and I like the challenge.
Well, I think we've all seen in the last few years that, the size in the camera is not everything, because now we have cameras like the ones from Blackmagic Design and many others that are actually capable of recording amazing quality RAW in an extremely small form factor, or the Z cams and many others. But let's talk about that subject a little bit later on, because it's very, very interesting, and I think it's a conversation where everybody should contribute. But before we do that, I want to lead over to Gunther, who is our technical expert. Hello, Gunther, how are you?
Yeah, hi, Nino. Nice to have you all in this chat here.
Yeah, thanks for joining in. You're also in Vienna, but you're not here with me at the office to keep it simple because of social distancing and so on, of course.
Yes, of course.
But actually, we did a bit of less social distancing 2 days ago when you came to the office to do a lab test with the C300 Mark III. Can you just explain a little bit in very short about our methodology and how you're actually performing these tests before telling us what the results are?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Basically, the lab tests that we do are always consist of 3 parts. We have a dynamic range step chart that we are shooting. It's a chart from Xyla where you have basically 21 steps or stops of dynamic range displayed via different luminance values of lamps or LEDs which are built into the chart. And when you shoot the chart with the camera, you can very easily visually count the stops in a waveform diagram that the camera is able to represent. That's the one thing. The second thing we can do is when shooting that chart, we can also run the images through an industry standard tool like ImaTest that we are using. It's an industry grade software which allows to analyze the individual patches of the chart to calculate the noise levels. And by that, we can rather easily calculate with the tool signal-to-noise ratios. And the signal-to-noise ratio of cameras is typically a good way to determine the total number of stops a camera can display. And we have a special, or not a special, but we have a cinema5D benchmark for the dynamic range measurement, which is a signal-to-noise ratio of 2, meaning that we count all the stops that are displayed above the noise floor of a camera. So we say we only want to count stops that are visible above the noise floor, and that leads to a criterion of signal-to-noise ratio of 2. And with that software, we can easily then compare various cameras between each other. The other thing we are doing,
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, because we often get the question why our dynamic range results are so different from what the manufacturers claim.
Yeah.
So why is that?
That's a very good question. The thing is that the dynamic range of a cinema camera or moving images camera is not so easily determined, because you can very easily determine the point where it clips the highlights, but it's not so easy to determine at which point the information displayed in the shadow areas or the noise is still usable or not. And you can say, okay, I still think this is usable, whereas somebody else might say, okay, this information displayed in the shadows here is not usable any longer. So you have to define a mathematical criterion to judge the dynamic range of a camera. And unfortunately, camera manufacturers have a choice here, because they could say, I find everything that is above the noise floor acceptable. I find everything that is buried within the noise floor already still acceptable. Or the third method, I could just determine the total amount of visible information that is still possible to see in the displayed information. So basically, that gives you more or less 3 choices to define the dynamic range of the camera. And we at cinema5D choose the criterion, a stop that is still outside the noise floor of a camera is usable for filmmaking. This is why we have our criterion, but many camera manufacturers, and as we are able to see also the C300 Mark III, Canon obviously is using the total number of discernible stops in the step chart, because it's the highest number. And in marketing terms, a high number is always a good thing. But that's certainly not the usable dynamic range of the camera.
So
that's why our values are always lower.
So ironically, the term ISO, which stands for International Standards Organization, is everything but a standard, because everybody is looking at things differently. Also in terms of how sensitive a particular level of ISO is, right?
Yeah, that's unfortunately the case. And we need actually a standard for moving images, for moving cameras. There's a standard for still cameras, and they are using a signal-to-noise ratio of 1. So the first stop that is buried in the noise floor is still usable, but for moving images, I think that's not sufficient. That's why we have our criterion of signal-to-noise ratio of 2. But yeah, we can establish a benchmark, Nino. Let's do that.
That's the idea, right? We are working on this, and we're trying to ask manufacturers to actually use our measurements also in their technical papers, because those are really, really based on a level playing field. And if somebody brings out an amazing camera with an amazing dynamic range, there's nothing they have to hide. But let's move on to the Canon cameras. Actually, last week we published the results you came out with from the C500 Mark II, which were quite good. So we were quite surprised by these results. But maybe you can talk a little bit about them before moving on, how that compares to its sibling, which is the C300 Mark III, which is the camera, it almost looks the same. It's the same body, it's just a smaller sensor. So it's going to be very interesting what the results are.
Yeah, correct. I mean, when we did the Canon C500 Mark II result or lab test, the full frame camera, I was quite curious because it was the first full frame cinema camera that I tested in the lab. Before we had only tested DSLRs, mirrorless cameras from various manufacturers like Panasonic, Sony, and so on. And those cameras, full frame sensors, of course, show very good dynamic range results, but those are also consumer cameras. So when the C500 arrived in the lab, I was quite curious to test a real cinema camera in that sense. And it was quite interesting to see that. And what we found actually was the highest dynamic range value measured so far with our method. It was 13.1 stops of the C500 Mark II. And that comes close already to the ARRI Alexa. And what we found so far, when we tested ARRI Alexa back in our lab some years ago, it showed 14 stops at our signal to noise ratio of 2. So actually the way how we measure and the definition of usable stops is close to ARRI, as it seems, because we could confirm ARRI's value. So it was great to see the C500 coming close to that with 13.1 stops.
So do you actually, Canon announced that, it's a new sensor in the C300 Mark III, which has something called dual gain output. We heard that in the press conference. It's not dual ISO, which is something that Panasonic and Sony use in their cinema cameras now, which is basically two different amplifications. Like they use two different amplifications on the sensor to get the lowest noise floor at the low ISO and the higher ISO. But what Canon is doing is they are, at least they're saying, they are using the same pixel and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a technician, but what they're saying is, I think, is they're using two different amplifications of the same pixel and then combining it into one image, which results in a higher dynamic range of approximately 1 stop compared to the C500 Mark II.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. This seems to be the case. And if you read, for instance, ARRI's definition of their sensors, the Aleph sensor, they seem to be using a similar principle. So obviously, we see the first implementations of other camera manufacturers of that principle as well, which is a good thing, and which means that we're actually going, we can expect high dynamic range values out of that implementation.
But, comparing the C500 Mark II to the C300 Mark III, can you agree with Canon in principle that the newer camera has 1 stop more of dynamic range, even using our measurement?
It's the question compared to what? If you compare it to the old C300, probably that's true, yes.
But not, compare the C500 Mark II to the C300 Mark III.
Oh, I cannot confirm that. It does not have a higher dynamic range. Should we spoil the results already, or is that coming later?
Yeah, you can spoil them now because we're in the middle of it. Actually, I'm asking my director to use the. I think we have the charts here to show.
Yeah.
So he could run through the charts if he hears me. But yeah, you can start by telling us the results.
Yeah. Now, basically, the first thing I always like to do is when we shoot the step chart showing the full 21 stops of dynamic range is a waveform that I like to look at. And in the waveform already, you can clearly see about 13 stops above the noise floor. Just visually looking at the waveform, which is great, which is actually on the same level like the C500 Mark II. So we are having here a Super 35 camera having the same a very similar dynamic range than the C500 Mark II, the full frame camera. That's great. And ImaTest, the industry-grade software that we're using to calculate the noise levels on the patches, confirms that result with 12.8 stops. So the exact figure for the C300 Mark II at the signal-to-noise ratio of 2 is 12.8 stops.
And that's a pretty good result.
That's a very good result.
Yeah.
It's a very good result.
So I think we just have to add that this is a pre-production model. Usually we don't run tests on pre-production models, but since that was in the office, we were very curious, and we will probably will run another test when the camera has the final firmware.
Yeah, although I have to say, I mean, it is a pre-production model, and I think it starts shipping in June or July. So they might still add some work on the firmware, and they always do. But I can tell you that, and I'm sure maybe Jake can agree, it feels like a pretty final camera. I haven't found any bugs this time. You know, usually it's very normal to find bugs in a pre-production camera, but this feels pretty final. I think even the firmware has a version 1.0 something. I don't know what your impressions were, Jake.
Yeah, it seemed pretty solid. Yeah, I remember when the C500 Mark II, when that first came around through our door, that seemed a lot more earlier on in the production cycle than this one. So yeah, it does seem like they've. I mean, obviously, they're going to be taking so many parts and so many software cues from the 300 Mark III, from the 500 Mark II in this one, that in theory should be easier for them to finalize something. So yeah, I can see. I think it is June when they're supposed to be shipping, and I have no quarrels with Canon. They'll be able to deliver by then. So.
Yeah, I think we could move on to the interview that I did with Paul Atkinson from Canon UK about the new camera. We could show that here in the stream as well, and then maybe after that come back and talk about how we think, is there still a market for a camera for around 10,000 euros or not, or are the small cameras going to replace everything? Because I want to pick up from that conversation from before. But I think now we can start that video interview.
This is the new Canon C300 Mark III.
The cinema5D virtual show is brought to you by B&H, the professional source for all your video needs. CVP, the leading specialist in creative cine, video, and photo solutions. Tilta, arm your camera. Nanlite, professional lighting solution. And Manfrotto, imagine more.
Welcome everybody to the cinema5D virtual show. I'm here with Canon, who just announced the C300 Mark III. I'm here with Paul Atkinson. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Very well. Here in quarantine, here in Vienna, Austria, and I guess you're in the UK?
Yeah, about 50 kilometers north of London in the same sort of situation. So.
Yeah, so we appreciate that you're still, Canon still announced an amazing new product despite the circumstances, because at one point the situation will be better for all of us, and so we can actually use the shiny new tools that we have here. So you just announced the C300 Mark III, which looks very much like the C500 Mark II. What can you tell me about this camera? What's new compared to the C300 Mark II?
So the major difference is the new camera is a super 35mm sensor, which is a new technology called dual gate output. The main difference is an improvement in low light performance, an extended dynamic range in excess of 16 stops, the ability to do 4K 120p in RAW or XFAVC. But it retains the modular design that we've introduced on the C500 Mark II, which means the camera can be expanded with different expansion modules and the user-changeable lens mount.
All right. Are there any other differences to the C500 Mark II?
The major difference really is in the codec options. Apart from the Cinema Raw Lite that we also have on the 500 Mark II and the C200, we have XFAVC, which is available in all-eye or long-op options, and then also the ability to record proxies across both settings.
All right, let's take a closer look at all this a little bit later on. So who is the typical target user for this camera?
The camera, I think, is going to fit in a fairly wide range of applications, everything from sort of mainstream cinema that want the look of the Super 35mm, right the way through to broadcast, documentary, independent movies, just the whole range, really, of professional applications that want the cinema look.
Well, a lot of people, I'm sure, are surprised that it, looks the same as a C500 Mark II, which is it's bigger and more expensive full-frame sibling.
Yep.
Why did you decide to do the same form factor again?
The form factor on the C500 Mark II has actually proved to be really popular, and even things like the optional viewfinder, plus the ability to put the expansion modules on, which means that you can add connectivity without losing anything over the camera. So this whole concept of making the camera work the way you want it, you've got the expansion unit 2 there, which adds a whole load of functionality to the camera. So we kept that going because then the accessories are compatible, so that the accessories for the 500 Mark II will fit on the new camera as well.
Let's talk about the sensor. You already mentioned the new technology. It's called dual gain output.
Yeah.
But first of all, I mean, let's look at the C500 Mark II, which has a full frame sensor, and this one, which has a super 35mm sensor. So you already mentioned that it has this new technology. Is it a completely new sensor?
Yes, it is. It's a completely new sensor that's designed and made by Canon for Canon. And this is the first camera that this sensor's been included in.
What's the native ISO?
For native ISO for Log2 is the same as a lot of the other sensors, whereas it's 800 ISO.
So the C300 Mark III also features a new technology on the sensor, which is, in my opinion, probably the most impressive innovation compared to the C500 Mark II, which is called the dual gain output, DGO. Is that like a dual ISO from other manufacturers, or what is it?
It works in a different way to dual ISO. So the way that DGO is working is the image is being looked at and then imaged with one amplification on the gain being done for highlight and one for shadow. And this is then combined to give you that single image, to give you the wider dynamic range. And this is all happening on the sensor. So before it even gets into the processor, you've got that image that is ready to go through and then become part of a HDR workflow, for instance. It gives you quite a few other benefits as well. It gives you an extended dynamic range in excess of 16 stops, but also with a lower noise in the shadows. And as a nice advantage as well is, I mean, we've always been known for our low light performance in our Cinema EOS range, so you'll get lower noise as well. The major difference is that DGO will work at any ISO that you set to give you that same effect. Obviously, as you go to higher ISOs, you would expect higher noise, but you will not get that amplified noise, if you like, that would be caused by something being done through the processor. So all in all, it just makes it a much cleaner image, makes it much easier for grading and for post-production.
Okay, interesting. But it is always on.
It's always on. So up to 60p, DGO is active, and then once you go into the higher frame rates, it becomes inactive.
And the dual gain output is the reason why Canon says there is one stop more in dynamic range compared to
That's
C500
correct, yes.
Mark II?
It's that extra amplification that's happening that gives us that extra in excess of one stop.
I mean, this is the first Canon cinema camera to which is able to record 120 frames per second in 4K using the full sensor width. This has been something, probably one of the biggest criticisms of Canon cinema cameras in the past few years compared to the competitors, that it was not possible to record really high frame rates using the full sensor width. Now, of course, you have a lot of, I mean, the C500 Mark II proves to be a very, very popular camera as well, but it still has that downside. Are there any, and now you have the new camera, which is probably going to be less expensive. We're going to talk about the price at the end. You think there are any plans to, enable higher frame rates also with the C500 Mark II, or is this not possible?
I'm not entirely sure that would be possible. This is a new sensor, and it's the combination of the new sensor with the Digic DV7 processor that's allowing us to get that extra bit of high frame rate at the full frame setting, and that's available in Cinema Raw Light as well as XF AVC. So I'm not entirely sure that we'll be able to go down the route of sort of a retrospective fix, if you like, because I think it's more of a hardware thing.
So you can do 120 up to 120 frames in 4K. If we switch to a crop mode, how high can it go?
We can go down to the Super 16mm 2K crop mode, and we can go up to 180 frames a second then.
One question that also came up, because I've already fiddled a little bit with the camera. We have it for a couple of days. Of course, it's in the pre-release firmware, but it honestly feels quite final already. I didn't find any bugs yet, but we're still, still working with it. But in terms of the RAW, you said it's again the Cinema Raw Light that's already been used in the C200. The C500 Mark II. The
way that the RAW is produced is slightly different to the two cameras. So with the 1DX Mark III, it is a very similar sort of RAW that is set automatically to Canon Log 3. With the Cinema Raw Light that we're using in this camera, we would go to Canon Log 2. They are quite interchangeable, so you could use the 1DX3 quite successfully as a B camera or crash cam in a production for either of the newer cameras. Really,
that's an expensive crash cam.
Yes, it is, but at the end of the day, as long as the memory card survives.
Depends on the budget.
It's true.
Yeah. Another thing, codecs. I think this is the first camera that also has not only XF AVC all-eye, but also XF AVC long GOP codec.
Yeah, that's correct.
And also a proxy codec, right?
Yeah. So apart from the Cinema Raw Light option, XF AVC, as you correctly said, in all-eye or long GOP. And this has been done really to increase the versatility. So with the all-eye, where every frame is coded, if you like, each time, we have a lower compression and therefore a higher data rate. And for people who don't want to shoot RAW, and there's still quite a lot of people who wouldn't want to shoot RAW for technical or financial reasons, it gives them the optimum of image quality and file size. But there are going to be times where you need a quicker turnaround. So the long GOP would be ideal for them. So this is things like news feature who need to get footage back to a newsroom or back to a studio, etc., more quickly. As far as the proxies are concerned, yes, we are now able to do proxies not only for RAW recording, but also for XF AVC, and that's recorded to the SD card.
Let's talk about simultaneously recording, actually. What is possible? I mean, we have two CF Express card slots in there, plus an SD card slot.
Yeah.
CF Express is certainly the latest and fastest available standard. And finally, cards are getting more available these days.
Yeah.
And also less expensive, luckily. But what is possible? What can I record simultaneously on the two card slots?
So you can record 2 lots of RAW simultaneously, or relay, or 2 lots of XF AVC, and again, either flavor of all-eye or long GOP simultaneously, plus the proxies to the SD card.
Are there any limitations if I switch to the fast, like the slow motion stuff, the high speed record?
No, you'll record exactly the same proxy as you will do. So whatever your main recording set it is, that'll be recorded to all 3 cards if that's how you've set the camera up.
Let's mention some of the things that are already part of the C500 Mark II, which is the dual pixel autofocus.
So this, again, is, I firmly believe, one of the most effective autofocus systems on any camera from anyone. It's covering 80% vertically and horizontally of the sensor, exactly the same as the other cameras. On the C500 Mark II, we did change slightly the way that it works. So one of the reasons that autofocus sometimes isn't liked by a lot of users is the fact that it's very linear. It's out of focus, it's in focus. So what we did on the C500 Mark II is we introduced a slight change to the way that system works. And that was done so that it emulates the way a focus puller works. So the focus puller will start off quickly, will then smooth out the action, and then just before focus is achieved, they'll slow it down. And so this camera, as well as the C500 Mark II, bring that in. If you don't want to use the autofocus system, then it does also include the dual pixel focus manual focus guide, which gives you that nice little simple GUI to tell you which way to turn the lens, and then brings it into focus if you're using manual focus. And the nice thing is that if you're using a Canon Cine Prime lens, for instance, with the EF mount, you've still got the electronics. Although you won't get autofocus anyway, you will still have that functionality of being able to use that system with the Cine Prime lens.
Interesting. And I believe it was also, as you mentioned, enhanced with the C500 Mark II, because I mean the dual pixel autofocus has been around for a couple of years, but it's been continuously made better.
Yeah, I mean it's just with each sort of as we progress on, we're able to bring in improvements to it, and that both systems actually, that the dual pixel autofocus, when people actually start using it and they realize that they can trust it. That's the important thing, is that it's a focus system that you can trust. And for a single shooter, for a documentary shooter that we would hope would be using these cameras, it's going to be invaluable because it makes sure that that shot is as sharp as it needs to be for today's production values.
Are there any limitations in where it works? Like, does it work in RAW?
It works in RAW. It'll work in the higher frame rates. The only limitation you will get is if you close your aperture down lower than f13 or equivalent in t-stop, and then because the light, it still needs some contrast to work. But that's pretty much the only limitation.
Electronic stabilization. This is also something that the C500 Mark II has.
Yep.
Is this also in this camera?
Yes, it is. So it's exactly the same system. It's almost like a hybrid system. So you activate it if you want it. It's not on all the time. Most of our lenses, especially if the photo lenses are being used, are optically stabilized, and a lot of people find that that's enough. Sometimes it isn't. So then the camera, you can switch on the electronic stabilization within the camera, and that will give you a total of 5 axis of stabilization. Now, the nice thing is that if you were to put on, again, a Cinema Prime lens on the EF mount, you will get the focal length information. So you can then use the electronic system, I beg your pardon, it'll automatically pick up the focal length of the lens and correct accordingly. If you're using a PL mount lens, however, there's no contacts to tell you the focal length. So then you go into the menu and you can select and store that focal length. So then you'll get the full 5 stops of image, beg your pardon, 5-axis image stabilization within the camera as well. And it will also work in anamorphic in 4-axis.
Yeah, let's move on to pricing and availability. I mean, the C500 Mark II was already quite a surprise in terms of pricing compared to the C300 Mark II, which was basically the same price as the C500 Mark II. So what are we looking at here?
So our target price on this on release is around about 10,000 euros, excluding tax, and availability we're looking at the end of June.
Very nice. I'm sure this will be a very popular camera. I'm looking forward to trying it out a little bit more. Thank you very much for your time, Paul.
No problem.
Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to cinema5D's YouTube channel and our website for more news about new products and our virtual show, which is essentially our replacement for NAB. We'll also have another video with Paul talking about their new servo zoom, the 25-50. So stay tuned and thanks for watching.
After that interview, can everybody hear me? Yeah. So we're back after that interview. Yeah, I mean, I just want to continue where we left off. Actually, we talked about small cameras versus big cameras. I want to ask our audience, like our members of the audience, what do you guys think? Is anybody still interested in buying expensive cameras, or do you think everything is moving to smaller cameras? And I'm not only talking about smaller, but also less expensive cameras. Do you think in this time and age, especially after this crisis is over, and it eventually will be over, do you think that budgets will change? Budgets of TV productions, budgets of advertising, commercial productions, corporate films. Do you think there's still a market? Do you think it still makes sense to invest in a camera of 10,000 or more euros? Or do you think everything will move over to smaller ones? And yeah, maybe you can just type in the YouTube chat, and we will take some of your questions and talk about them here in our little round here. But Philip, I mean, you're somebody who has worked with a lot of different cameras over the years. You're somebody that used to work with really, really big broadcast cameras. Like me, I think you also bought the C300, the original one it came out, and then moved over to the Sony FS7 for your production work mostly. But you also used to own a Red camera. But you've also been somebody who's embracing the really small cameras like Johnny. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think these big cameras still have a future, or is this are they on their way out?
Well, it depends what you define as a big camera. A video camera, for sure, has a huge place still because it's designed for, I've got here, finally managed to get hold of an S1H, which is obviously the form factor of a stills camera with very high spec features, but it doesn't have the professional connections on it, which is what you want. And so, I have the FX9. I still have my C200, which is a really good camera. If it just had 10-bit internal, I would be so happy. But certain people do need video cameras for certain things, but I also like small cameras as well because I work a lot faster with them, and for certain types of filming and putting on gimbals and stuff, it's perfect. I love my FX9. I wish it was smaller. I wish that we could have a camera that's truly modular. So, we do have small brick type cameras like the Z camera, etc., but they aren't truly modular because truly modular would mean you can slot on things like, like a Lego type camera. That's what I would love to actually see. So we could have it broken down to something really small if we want to, but then if we need to have the professional connections and everything else, that would be wonderful. So, I mean, it's, one day we might have that. But right now, FX9 is my main camera, and then A7 III, A7R III tends to be my smaller cameras. But I have others, I use the Marvo LF at sometimes, which is still small, but the moment you need to put it handheld, you need to build it up into a proper shoulder rig. So you need to actually, and then there's weight issues because we're front heavy. It's all these complications. For 17 years, I worked in news. It was just a camera that went on my shoulder and it was perfect. And that was it. And all these sort of things that we have about trying to get stable handheld and stuff. The reason we want IBIS on the mirrorless cameras is because of the micro jitters that we get from the rolling shutter. I don't want to replace a tripod or replace a gimbal. I just want it to not look jittery. That's basically what it is. Because that's one of the biggest issues with the stills cameras is they have these micro jitters. So I don't really know. I mean, I personally do need to have a proper video camera, and I also need to have a small camera. And that's the thing, is the small camera will never have the big connections that we want until we have a truly modular form factor.
But over the last couple of years, we've had more and more camera manufacturers put more and more features into the small camera. So we didn't used to have small cameras with 10-bit recording or even 12-bit recording. Now we have some of those. We didn't used to have small cameras with proper waveforms and peaking and zebras and all that stuff. Now we have those cameras. So the question is, once these cameras will have ND filters and professional audio connectors on all of them, you can always make a camera bigger, but you cannot make it smaller. So the question is, will there be a point in time where we are all like, well, there's no reason to use a larger camera anymore?
Until it's about the connection still. That's the thing. The S1H, it has a full-size HDMI, but an HDMI is not a professional connection. It's not lockable. It comes out. It can break. Those sort of things. Time code. All the sort of things that you need in a professional video camera. Now, I mean, that's basically what the things that I need, as well as the great image, etc. So, I mean, it's I haven't bought a big camera for a long time, and I don't think I ever will again. An FX9 is not a huge camera, or easily put on that extension unit, it's still okay, but it's not, you know, it's not the size of, you know, the EOS R5, for example, excites me way more than the C300 Mark III because of its specs sound amazing for what it is. And it's going to be a lot cheaper. It has to be a lot cheaper than the C300 Mark III. All these marks and stuff. It's so confusing. It has to be a lot cheaper because, you know, we look at the price of the 1DX Mark III. And that's the thing that a lot of people are going to look at is the C300 Mark III is priced at about £9,000, just under, plus VAT, which is, of course, a big investment for people. Whereas, you know, if an R5 comes out, which is if it's as good as it sounds, it's very rare, very, very rare to see Canon specs and be excited. It's always in the past, it's been you see Canon specs and go, and then you use it and it's much better than you expected it to be. So that's what's surprising about the R5 is like these specs are so good. I'm hoping it's as good as it sounds.
That's a good point. Jake, I mean, from a CVP perspective, both personally for you as a filmmaker, but also from the retailer perspective, have you seen any shift in sales over the last few years? I think that would be very interesting for us, you know, like, do you actually see a shift from larger cameras to smaller ones, or is this basically the same as it used to be? I mean, are there more smaller cameras now being used for professional productions than used to be the case, or is the market just growing anyway, so you don't really notice?
Yeah, I mean, the original C300 and the FS7 were so incredibly popular back when they were initially released, and I think it was last year, I can't remember which platform put it out, but there was a study basically in the UK looking at the most popular rented cameras, and the FS7 was still number one. And there was, I think, the Alexa was just beneath it. And for us, the FX9 is so incredibly popular, purely because of the improvements they've done over the FS7. A lot of FS7 owner ops have just jumped on it, and a lot of rental houses have as well, which are some of our biggest clients. The rental houses in the UK are the way to kind of judge the overall picture of what's actually being used on productions. And yeah, the FX9 has become incredibly popular. And in terms of small cameras, yeah, I mean, they've all kind of, yeah, there's more and more better options with better sensors in them. But I think one thing that people don't talk about is like how much easier it is to pull an FX9 out of a bag and have it work versus like trying to rig up an R5, for example. Or if we're trying to rig that up into the same form factor and the same, you know, trying to make stuff modular, the DSLR size I don't think will work and shape won't work. I think it will need to be something like a Zcam or Kinfinity or Red, something more that kind of shape that you can then rig stuff around, because I think the Zcams have got it close, you know, like Philip says, those micro jitters from the weight and how you're holding it, just that's what, you know, you associate with bad video. So it's trying to get it to make it look cinematic by making it look smooth and consistent, and that's what you're adding stuff onto. And you know, those bigger weighted cameras, even not, you know, not the heavy ones like Venice or, you know, the bigger cinema cameras, even the FX9s, you don't get that look, because obviously you've got that little bit of extra weight, which you can get rid of with the smaller cameras. It's just, you know, prime example, we did we shot an little mini airsoft documentary for the 1DX Mark III that we're about to release, and I've grown up shooting with, like, you know, I've owned all the 5Ds. I grew up shooting with them and the 550Ds and all these old like classic Canon DSLR cameras, and 1DX Mark III was like one of the first time I'd used a Canon DSLR in years, like, and we were using it and I was like, this is so horrible to shoot with, like, because we didn't have any rigging for it. All we had was just the Ronin S, and trying to shoot handheld was just horrible. And we had the C500 Mark II there with us, and like we were both switching, myself and Joe switching, using both, and that really made it click in my head. I was like, you really need to rig all these cameras up, otherwise they are completely unusable. So I think I understand the perspective of having like the small cameras and rigging them up, but I think the C300 is not a big camera. Like, you can put that on a, you know, decent sized gimbal on the Mobi Pro, on, you know, a Ronin M, like a Ronin 2, very easily. So I think it's not as small as it could be, but I think, you know, the way the Canon does design the modular system on the back, I think it's great, and you can rig it. You know, you can make it much smaller, like, you know, like the Reds now, and actually fit it on gimbals, which obviously is one of the limitations of the FS7s and the FX9s, not being able to put it on gimbals, which for a lot of people does matter. So yeah, I think they've kind of done a good job on making it a decent size.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was one of the advantages of the original C300, that it was small enough to put on a gimbal, whereas the FS7 was just too long, and the FX9 as well, to put on a Movi or a Ronin, a normal Ronin, or the Ronin 2. But yeah, I mean, some people might have thought that this is the full camera here if you just tuned in a little bit late, but actually that is the camera, and that is the extension module 2, which is the same module for the C500. So we just basically use the one for the C500 to make it easier to power it with a V-mount, because the standard battery is, of course, much smaller. But this is the camera. So this is it's almost like a cube, which, as you said, makes it much easier to use on a gimbal. But I want to pose that question also to Gunther, because out of our talk here, Gunther is the only person. He is not a professional filmmaker. He's a professional engineer, but he's somebody who's an extremely talented filmmaker. In his spare time, he shoots a lot while he's traveling in the world on another engineering job. And we've posted a lot of his reviews over the years, because he has quite a unique eye, I think. And Gunther, you've really started filming with small cameras. So what's your take on the whole discussion of big versus small cameras? Also with thinking about the technical results that you get out of those cameras when you do the lab tests for Cinema5D.
Yeah, I think that's the last edition of your comment. I think is the conundrum in a way, because I really love small cameras, and especially when I'm traveling around, sometimes I only have a small bag that I take into the cabin when I'm on airplanes, and I just simply cannot take a big camera with me. And I started, for instance, with the GH1, the Panasonic GH1, a nice tiny camera, 10 years ago, actually. Time flies. But the thing was always the available codecs in the small cameras, and along that also audio options is always an issue. So you mentioned the connection issues before, and for me, for a long time, actually, the Sony A7S II was a very nice camera to have. I had it for about 5 years. It seemed to me like the best of all worlds, and I liked it a lot. On the other hand, I always hated the codec, the H.264 codec. I just simply cannot get along with it nicely, and my hardware, by the way, also, no matter which computer I take. And here is really the thing, that there are such nice codecs available already today, that I'm wondering why nobody combines a good codec into a small package. For instance, the Panasonic S1 or the Panasonic S1H, they still use this H.265, H.264 codecs, and it's really a pain to use them and to edit them. Of course, you can say, yes, I can do a proxy, or I do a conversion first before I go into the editing. Yes, you can do that. But for me, I would like to use it out of the box. And for instance, here, Blackmagic with their RAW codecs, the Blackmagic RAW is an amazingly fantastic codec. And that was one of the reasons why I now have a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K as my personal camera, because it's sort of still small. It has professional connections. You could, with the Mini XLR, also use professional microphones on it. And it has an amazing codec. You can record 6K RAW on an SD card with that camera. So for me, it's also about the codecs in the cameras.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I think probably Blackmagic Design are the ones who were most aggressive in putting RAW into their cameras, which is why everybody else is now trying to catch up. I mean, we also have to mention that there seems to be a patent issue with RED for internal RAW compression in camera bodies. So that prevents a lot of the other manufacturers, allegedly, to put in RAW compression into their bodies. But last but not least, Johnny, I mean, I think we know your take on small cameras. You are a big fan of small cameras. But where do you think all of this is headed?
I think both worlds will continue to grow and each one with its own direction. But for me, it's very simple. I think you have to take into account what you do in your professional life, how much money you want to spend, what you're looking for with a big or small camera. And I'm saying this again from being the oldest here. Do you need or do you have to impress anybody? And this is very a valid point, because I already talked to many younger filmmakers, and when I ask them why you're buying something kind of beyond your capabilities, it's quite expensive and it's big, the answer was, people will not take me to work if they will see me coming with something smaller. So I'm a big advocate of the small cameras, and I'll tell you like a personal story. When I bought, how many years? It was 6 years ago, the 1DC. Actually, Canon taught me a really good lesson. I bought my 1DC for $10,000. The camera covered itself, no problem. It was not an issue of work, but the camera itself became obsolete quite fast. And this taught me a lesson. As a professional, I want to have one camera that I can do most of my projects, let's say like 80 or 90% of my project by myself with my own equipment. And the rest, if I'm being asked to shoot with something else or something more sophisticated, I can always rent it. But me personally, I will never, ever invest a big sum in a camera. The market is moving quite fast forward, yeah. So I will go for something that I can afford at a certain point in life, and it gives me the best results. And not to forget that it's only a tool. That's just a tool. It's a tool that you should like and you should feel comfortable to work with. But at the end of the day, buy something that you can afford. Yeah. So I'm very comfortable with small cameras. I think we in a way we became like a professional whiners. That's how you say in English. Because right now the quality that we have from those small cameras, you know, if we had this conversation 5, 6, 10 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, what are we talking about? Those cameras are so good now. And the form factor is so easy to go around. So all we need to do really is to go out and shoot. Not today because of the virus, but go out and shoot. And that's my take on that. Sorry, I can't hear you. Nino, I can't hear you.
Now you can hear me. I was muted. Thank you, Johnny. Yeah, that's a very good point. So it really depends on the kind of job. I just hear that people can see what we're writing on the chat. So
oh, pizza! It's nice.
It's a learning process for all of us. But I'm asking Jacob now in the other room if there are any audience questions that should be answered, because of course I asked everybody to submit questions before, and we still have a lot of viewers on YouTube and Facebook. So I'm going to wait for that. And yeah, after that we'll move on to briefly talk about the new lens. But I hear there's not yet new questions. That's almost, I can't almost believe it. Somebody I saw asked about the recording time on a 512 gigabyte card in the C300 Mark II. I think it was about 1 hour in Cinema Raw Lite. So it's half a terabyte for 1 hour of recording in 4K with Cinema Raw Lite. I don't know in XFAVC, Intra and Long Op, but it will be a lot more, of course.
I've got more here if you want me to read them out.
Yeah, yes, please do.
So, yeah, Mark III, 512 gigabyte CF Express, RAW 25p, 67 minutes, RAW 50p, 67 minutes, RAW 120p, 25p base, 152 minutes, RAW 120, 50p base, 76 minutes, XFVC 25p, 166 minutes, XFVC 50p, 84 minutes, 120, 25, 166 minutes, 120, 50, 84 minutes. I'll put them in the chat as well. Thank you, Ollie Kenchington. He posted them literally about half an hour ago.
Jake, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because hopefully tomorrow I will get my new laptop, and I hope to edit the mini documentary that I shot with the 1DX Mark III, finally. Because this laptop was really delayed for a very long time. You said that you also shot and you're about to edit, or you started editing?
Yeah, we finished the edit, yeah.
Okay, so what? How did you edit? Did you make proxies, converted, or?
Yeah, so I made proxies for everything, and then edited the proxies, and then we did a round trip workflow through Resolve, and then Joe graded the raw selects in Resolve, and then export them and relink them.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, we have a question that was posted on the chat. It was directed at somebody else, but I think it's worth asking here. So ARAMV is asking, what do you think about the price and what we are paying for? What are we paying for on some cinema cameras, built-in ND and XLRs for $10,000 more? So yeah, what do we think about the price? Do we think it's something that is still, I mean, it's still justified? Is it too expensive? What does everybody think? Philip?
I don't know. I feel like I've already talked about this, about the price and stuff. Yeah, I mean, is it justified? I don't know. I don't know how much it costs to make. I don't know how much all the R&D costs. So I can't really say. I have certainly said that I'm never going to buy another camera over 10,000. Just under before VAT. So it just about qualified, because I just don't think it's like what Johnny was saying. It's difficult to justify as a business. If you need anything more expensive than that, you just rent it in as and when it's needed. Because I have a lot of cameras anyway, and I do spend a lot of time in post production, and they sit on the shelf. And I know you rent out your stuff. I just don't rent it out myself because I just don't trust.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think it's very hard,
and it is under that ceiling for sure. And it's what put me off the C500 Mark. Oops, there goes my earbuds. C500 Mark II. I just felt it's too expensive for me.
I think it's also very hard to make to justify such an expense if you're not actually renting out your gear these days anymore. Because as Jake already said, I mean, and I can just repeat that. I feel it also here in Austria, and I'm sure it's the same, at least all over Europe, but also in the US to a lesser degree. But the FS7 has taken over so much of the broadcast market for anything that is a super 35 mil camera. So it's really become the standard on documentary production. So they really what used to be the original C300, which became the standard. Or was it 7-8 years ago, is now the FS7. And the thing is, the production companies don't really ask for a better camera. It's like the question is, can you actually justify using an FX9 on a shoot when a client asks for an FS7? You probably will not put more money for that. And the same is true for a C300 Mark III. So it's very, very difficult. Because I don't see any of my clients pay more on a daily rate for a camera just because it has a good autofocus. They couldn't care less. They just expect me to pull focus even if I don't see properly. So yeah. All right. So there's another question. How do we get Ari to make an Amira Mini with sensor stabilization? So yeah, I don't think that will happen because I don't think that's the type of market for these cameras. But I have to say that the autofocus is something that some big lens manufacturers are now seriously considering, because some of the other big camera manufacturers like Canon and Sony have really, really professional autofocus now. So I think the next step will be, how do you actually release a cinema lens with autofocus? I think that's something that we will see in the coming years. And I hear some big lens companies talk about that behind the scenes, because that's clearly something that's on their minds now. I mean, Sony has announced a cinema line of lenses, which is actually trying to combine the autofocus with the manual focus features of professional cinema lenses. Let's see how those will turn out. But there's certainly a market for that. And 4/3 Rumors is asking, I would love to know how Sony managers are feeling now after reading the EOS R5 specs. Well, that's a good question. Yeah, we have been waiting for the A7S Mark III for how long? 5 years. So I'm slowly doubting that it will happen. But we have heard that Sony has pushed their press conference that was originally slated for today, even though NAB was cancelled. They've pushed it to April 30th. So let's see what's coming. They are marketing it as a Sony professional press conference. So it's probably not going to be the Alpha series, but the hope dies last. Yeah.
I think it's important to remind the people that theoretically, Sony doesn't really have to sell those cameras. They make the money from sensors, and they're selling sensors to everybody else. So even if it looks as if we are missing something because we know they can, the question is if they won't. Yeah. So let's hope that this time we don't have to change stuff, and hopefully they promised already once, at least to us in an interview, that the next best thing will come. But I think we are all grown up just to move forward, and you can't wait. You can't sit on the fence and wait forever.
Yeah. All right, I think we round it off here with this topic. I'm thanking Philip for joining because he will leave us now. And thank you very much for your time and for sticking around for so long. It was really interesting. Maybe you can keep the stream running on your Facebook page. But we will continue to talk about the new Canon lens, the 25-50. So thanks, Philip.
Good night, Philip. Bye.
Bye.
We can't hear you anymore, Philip. I think you're mute. You're mute. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much. And I'm asking my director to start the interview with about the Fuji. Sorry, not Fuji. I'm tired as well. About the Canon 25-50. It's very similar to a Fujinon lens in terms of focal range. That's why I'm saying that. And after that, we'll talk about that lens.
This is a new Canon 10x servo cinezoom, 25-250 millimeters.
The cinema5D virtual show is brought to you by B&H, the professional source for all your video needs. CVP, the leading specialist in creative cine, video, and photo solutions. Atomos, better monitoring, better recording. Subtler, set your ideas in motion. And Fomex, devoted to remarkable light.
Welcome everybody to the cinema5D virtual show, our replacement for the NAB that never happened. And today I'm talking to Paul Atkinson from Canon. How are you, Paul?
I'm good, thank you. Like everybody else, trying to make the best of the situation we find ourselves in.
That's how it is. You guys just introduced the C300 Mark III. We talked about that in another video, but you also introduced a new lens, the 25-250 servo cinezoom. What can you tell me about it?
So this is a lens that joins the two existing ones, the CN7 and the CN20, with a focal length range of 25-250 millimeters, but also features a built-in 1.5 times extender. This makes it an extremely useful lens across a range of applications, from cinema to natural history, wildlife, drama documentary, and drama. But also able to be used in a variety of shooting situations. So whether we're on a tripod or off the shoulder, on location, it's a really versatile lens that covers a Super 35mm sensor, but can also cover a full frame sensor while using the built-in 1.5 times extender. So a really versatile lens across a wide range of applications.
So we already had the 17-120 servo zoom, which is a very, very popular servo zoom. I've used it a lot on different productions, and I think it's one of the most versatile in terms of what you need as a documentary filmmaker, which is what I mostly shoot. But sometimes it's not long enough. So I guess this is where the new one comes in.
Yeah, so apart from having the slightly extended normal zoom range, it's got a built-in 1.5 times extender as well. And that pushes it out to 375mm at the top end.
So the target users for this lens is also broadcast documentary filmmakers, or who do you have in mind?
Exactly right. So the broadcast and documentary filmmakers But because of the versatility of the lens and the way that you can take the servo unit off, it lends itself quite nicely into drama production and cine production, where you'd want to use traditional manual focusing as well. So it's a very versatile lens across the entire sort of focal length range.
What is the t-stop or f-stop of the lens?
It's T2.95 between 25 and 187 millimeters, and then T3.95 for the rest of the range. When you put in the 1.5 times extender, that becomes a T4.4 at the lower end, up to 5.9 at the upper end. So that makes it comparable with the CN20 sort of range of T-stops.
So this is a super 35 millimeter zoom lens, right?
It is. All our cine zooms and cine servo zooms are engineered to suit the super 35 millimeter sensor. With this lens, however, once you activate the extender, then you get full frame coverage as well, which means the C500 Mark II and the C700 FF, for instance, it becomes then fully compatible with those cameras as well.
And that extender is built in?
That's correct, yeah. It's a built-in extender, optical extender at the rear of the lens.
So the servo unit, I understand, can also be detached. Is that something users can do? Is that something you have to send it in?
No, it's a completely user operation. You can just detach it yourself if you need to, as I said, and then it becomes compatible with the industry standard follow focus and zoom demand controllers that you can get.
Let's talk about the communication of this lens. How does it communicate with the camera, and what standards does it support?
So the EF mount lens will have the normal EF connections on there. This gives you the ability to use a lot of the EF functions. So things like chromatic aberration, things like your focal length and your autofocus settings as well, depending on whether you're in manual or autofocus settings. And we also have Cook-Eye technology built in there as well, which is used on the PL mount versions. So a very versatile lens. And then we have the 12-pin connector at the back as well.
In terms of powering the lens, if I use that on a C300 Mark III, for example, I would have to use the extension unit, right, in order to be able to get power.
Yeah, that's correct. So you need to fit the expansion unit 2, which has the correct connection on the back of that unit.
You mentioned the mounts already, so there are different mounts available?
Yep, it'll be available both as an EF or a PL mount version. However, you can get the mount changed, but this is not a user operation. This needs to go to a Canon service center or authorized service center, and will be a paid-for service.
And now to the most exciting part, how much is it going to cost?
You're looking at around about 27,500 euros ex-tax, and availability we're looking around July.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay, no worries, and best of luck.
Yeah, and hopefully we see each other again at the actual trade show soon.
IBC, I'm still confident we'll see you at IBC.
I'm slowly losing hope that this is going to happen, but yeah, otherwise the rest of the year will be like this.
It will, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care, Dina.
And thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to cinema5D for more from our virtual show, our replacement for NAB and Photokina, which also unfortunately has been canceled. But we're doing our best to keep you updated on all the new developments and all the new products, and also a lot of talks with filmmakers. Please stay tuned. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and best of luck.
Here we are back. So you heard everything about the new about the new Canon 25-250. I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah, okay. It's a little bit confusing and it's getting late here. So this is a new Canon servo zoom lens. We've had the 17-120 before, which was a really popular choice for documentary filmmakers that I've used a lot. And now there's a longer version actually, but a little bit less wide on the front end. What's interesting to me about this lens is the fact that it is made for a super 35 millimeter, but it also works on the full frame camera like the C500 Mark II or a Sony FX9. by using the built-in crop adapter. So you can have a 1.5 times magnification and then use it on a full frame and basically counteract that. So basically you will have the same focal range, but on a full frame sensor using that. Jake, what are your thoughts on this lens, and what are your thoughts on the 17-120? Were there a lot of sales on CVP?
Yeah, I mean, the CN7 was such a popular broadcast and documentary lens purely because of its range and size. You know, given the optical quality of it and the range you get throughout it, it's actually pretty small. Though a lot of operators will probably very much disagree with me after days of shooting with it. But this one's only a little bit bigger, and like you say, given the fact you've got the 1.5 times extender in there, makes it quite an interesting little option, especially for wildlife. I think will lap this up because a lot of them will still use Super 35 sensors. Yeah, there are some full frame cameras out there in the wildlife market, but yeah, they're gonna love this. The fact you've got the extender built in and the extended range and not a huge package. It does make sense for Canon to introduce this kind of focal length and see like CN style zooms, because obviously now it sits with the CN7 and the CN20 as well, which again is a very popular lens in its own little way, even though it is a very niche lens at the same time. But yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think they're very smart to put the 1.5 times extender in there to please the people who've got full frame cameras and want to use it, and for the people who want the extra range out of it as well. And they've done it in quite a small package, so yeah, it's a nice little addition.
Do you know the price on the CN7, like the 17-120 right now? How much cheaper is that? Just, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I think it started at the same price in the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's about 18 grand ex-VAT at the moment.
Okay.
Around.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it will find its market as well, because it's really, if you compare it to the Fujinon lineup, their Cabrio lenses and all that, that was exactly the kind of focal length that was missing on the Canon side. I mean, there's also the 50-1000, which is a beast of a lens, but it's kind of unique on the market. It's an amazing lens, yeah. And my director Bobo here, actually, he owns one and he loves it, and we've shot a lot of things with that. You can shoot amazing theater productions with it and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, see him? He's it's a really, really cool lens. So I'm looking forward to trying the 25-250 as well. Let's go back to a couple more questions here. I think most of them are still relating to the C300 Mark III, of course. TN Pictures was asking, what is the battery life on the C300 Mark III? I have to say, I don't know. I haven't really tried it because I've only used it with the extension module, and I've had a 150 watt-hours battery on there, and it lasted, I think, around 4 or 5 hours. So it didn't use too much power at all. I don't know what the battery life is with the standard Canon batteries, but I know they're quite powerful, so they should be doing fine.
I think it's for a BPA 60, they've said you can get around 130 minutes of continuous recording in cinema raw light. So that equates to roughly with the specs they gave me is about 31 watts power draw.
Yeah, and that's also very similar to what Sony has on the FS7, I think. FX9 takes a little bit more power, but it's still okay. Yeah. Next question from Loom Movies. Are there any infos for an interchangeable RF mount for the C300 Mark III? I covered that in the beginning. No, unfortunately not. I asked that question when we had the preliminary press discussion about that, a presentation by Canon. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be possible because of the smaller flange distance. You would think it would be possible if you change the entire mount, but apparently, unfortunately, it is not. I'm hoping that this will be something that they will put in the future version of those cameras, because I agree this would be something amazing. And actually, if they put in an RF mount, you wouldn't need an EF or PL mount, because you could adapt those onto the RF mount because of the shorter flange distance. So essentially like Sony does with the E-mount. And then also Loom Movies is asking, is there any promotional material that shows the camera in some kind of narrative environment? Well, they did put out a movie today, which they also sent us earlier today, about a ballerina dancing around a abandoned airplane, which looks amazing. It's not really narrative, but it's kind of a music video. It's edited to classical music, I think Tchaikovsky, and it looks kind of amazing. And there's a behind the scenes around that which you can watch. I'm not aware if there is anything else so far in terms of narrative environment. All right. I think we'll slowly wrap it up here. I'm asking each one of you for a last closing statement, and then I will say what's in store for tomorrow's virtual show, which will start at the same time. So, Gunther, what do you want to say as a farewell note?
Yeah, well, I think as others have said already before, I think Johnny, I like it really that Canon is back here with some very innovative camera designs, bringing things like dual gain technology to the market in a not so affordable but still reasonably priced package. And I hope that other manufacturers will follow suit in this case, and that technologies, sensor technologies like that, we will see also in smaller cameras in the future. That would be a great reason for me to buy one.
And Johnny?
I'm tired. I want to go to sleep.
What do you mean?
I'm joking.
It's like 5 in the morning, isn't it?
I'm joking. Exactly. It's 4:20 in the morning. No, in all seriousness, Canon is back, and I'm very, very curious to see how the market will react in the next days, because that's not the only announcement which is out there, as you can imagine. Manufacturers were working hard to come up with things for NAB, and so I would say that personally, my fingers are burning. I want to touch the R5. I want to go out. I want to try it. I want to see how it's really gonna work for me. But I guess I'll be busy first to edit the 1DX Mark III footage. Nice little story. Colors looks simply amazing, and very easy to grade. Yeah, that's it. And by the way, Jake, I felt exactly like you. The 1DX Mark III is not a camera that you can just run and gun. Yeah, it's especially after working with mirrorless cameras. You put it's actually okay. It's a DSLR. It's not a mirrorless, and so on. But it's doable. And I think one of the things that helped me personally was the now when you actually, even if you work in log, you can actually tune the screen to show a Rec 709 image, and then you can judge exposure much better. It's not a matter of too much guessing anymore. So that was kind of easy for me.
Yeah.
Great. And Jake, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think all the announcements have been super exciting. And one thing we actually didn't mention was they also dropped the price of the CNE 15.5 47-28 and the 3105-28 to like just under $10,000 US. And that's really exciting as well, because again, cinema zoom lenses are something that on that kind of market, there's only a few options. So the fact that Canon have cut the price, and these two lenses are fantastic, the fact that they've dropped their price on them is actually really interesting. I'm intrigued to see if they're going to bring out like some new full frame versions, or whether or not this is just them trying to tactically position them in a range where they can be paired up with the C300 Mark III for owner ops that want to invest into their own glass as well. Because these lenses are great. But yeah, I think everything they've released is, today, like Johnny said, Canon are back, and this is them coming back with a big bang as well. Because the R5 looks like an absolute beast. I'm really intrigued to see what the image out of it looks like. And the C300 Mark III, from what I've seen and what we've done so far, looks brilliant. So I'm interested to get that back into our office once we're back at full operation, everyone's back. And see how it compares with everything else that comes out over the next couple of months.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining in and taking so much time today. And again, sorry to everybody, you guys, and also everybody watching for the beginning of this live show where we had a lot of technical issues. That's the first time we're doing it from here. So sorry for that, but I think it was still very worthwhile. That rounds off our Canon Day at NAB, which never happened. So that's why we did we're doing the virtual show. Tomorrow will be another exciting day. We won't have a day which is specifically about one manufacturer like today, because we knew a lot of stuff from Canon was coming. Tomorrow, we're going to have a range of different subjects. For example, we are going to talk to Atomus about ProRes RAW recording in their recorders. I can't give any specifics yet, but it will be worth watching tomorrow. You will know more tomorrow. We will also have Phil Holland on the line. Phil is a director of photography and director based in California. And you might know a lot of his work actually without knowing it, because he's the guy who shot a lot of the aerials in the Apple TV screensavers. So all the, I think all the American ones, or most of the American shots there, he shot them. But he can talk about that tomorrow. But we're actually going to focus on copyright infringement in the filmmaking industry. He had a big case recently that he was posting about on Facebook, and we want to talk to him about it. It's when a big company actually takes your creation and just uses it for their commercials without paying you or without even telling you, that's kind of upsetting, and that's what we're going to talk about with Phil. We'll also talk to Christoph Tilly, who is also a Vienna-based director of photography. You might have seen his talk that we broadcasted, I think in November, which was about, I bought an expensive camera, now I'm a DP. He was somebody who bought an F65 in order to get into the cinematography game. He is a very talented filmmaker, but he, tried to buy himself into the game, which didn't really work out. And tomorrow we have kind of a follow-up on that story, because he called me up and told me that he has an interesting plan how to survive the COVID-19 crisis as a business by investing even more money. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about that tomorrow with him. And last but not least, we are also going to have on the line Alistair Chapman from the UK. You will certainly know him as well as the Sony expert for Sony cameras from the UK. Has been doing Sony workshops for much longer than I can remember. And he actually will talk about how to survive as a freelance cameraman in this completely changing environment that we're in right now, especially surrounding the coronavirus crisis that is affecting a lot of small businesses and filmmakers and freelancers very, very hard around the world. So that's going to be tomorrow, the virtual show for tomorrow, starting at 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time, or 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, or 5 p.m. UK time. Wherever you are, you can stay tuned to cinema5D, and please come back. And thanks everybody again for being part of this panel. That's it for today, and see you tomorrow.
B&H, the professional
Good night.
source for all your video
Good
needs.
night.
CVP, the leading specialist in creative cine, video, and photo solutions. Blackmagic Design, creating amazing solutions for film, post-production, and television. Atomos, better monitoring, better recording. Fomex, devoted to remarkable light. Fujifilm, value from innovation. Hollyland, for a better view. Manfrotto, imagine more. Nanlite, professional lighting solution. Sattler, set your ideas in motion. SERP, better films. And Tilted, arm your camera.